All right. Nabahatan rose to rule while still very young, and though it is said that he died in the grip of a demon, with blood welling up from within his mouth, the other version, that he died a tombless wanderer, seems more probable, for it is so written on the tablets of Aman. In the days of his father, the enlightened ones had regained strength in the land of Egypt, though they remained a hidden force, and all their deeds were secret. Nevertheless, they were not unknown to the priesthoods, which were then strong, though they were regarded with much disfavor. In those days, the charges made against the enlightened ones were that they stirred up the lowly against the powerful. They tried to turn the land over to change that which had ever been. Therefore, those who knew the great God dwelt in seclusion and hiding. Their names were unknown, their faces unseen. The mother of Nabahatan was Taui, one of the chosen ones. In those days, there were still 4 ranks of the faithful. Twice born, the enlightened ones, the chosen ones, and the dwellers in light. Among the dwellers in light, there were seekers in light and laborers in light, even then as now. The wife of Pharaoh, though of high blood, was no more than half Egyptian. Her ways were strange. While he had still not come to manhood, the mother of Pharaoh taught him the ways of light. She revealed many of its secrets, probably without proper authority, though this cannot be known. However, though the leader of the light in Egypt was never far removed from the Pharaoh, only during days in the far distant past were kings numbered among the enlightened. Only in the days of true greatness, days long gone down into dust, days long forgotten in the land, yet ever we have hoped. The kings bred for goodness, the families reared to conserve spirituality, were swayed between 2 influences, that of the spiritually inspired ones and that of the earthly orientated ones. Earthly conditions being what they are, and the purpose of earth being what it is, it was too early in the generations of men to expect goodness to triumph. It is in this that the forces of good are confounded. They anticipate too easy a victory. Yet though the pestle grinds slowly, it grinds with every blow. It was the wife of Pharaoh who influenced him to disclose some of the mysteries which, since the time just mentioned, had been completely withdrawn and very carefully hidden. Thus, though the forces of evil had prevailed in the land, they had not uncovered the inner shrine of the sacred mysteries. Such mysteries as they had discovered proved of little value to them and were soon so distorted and perverted as to be useless. The great secret of how to penetrate the barrier between the 2 spheres of mortal and spirit was still completely secured. If nothing else, its very dangers would have safeguarded it. Actually, though it is said that the secret mysteries were disclosed, this did not happen. All that did happen was the Pharaoh used the knowledge he had to try to give the people a greater insight into the way of light, the true way. As is ever done, he veiled the all-consuming brilliance of truth, leaving just sufficient glimmer to light the way to become a beacon. Nabahatan himself saw the truth but dimly, for though he tried, he failed to meet the tests of the enlightened one. Perhaps it was this that inclined him away from the faithful. How many, when they discover what the knowledge of truth entails, falter on the path? The Pharaoh, the great one of Egypt, was ill-informed in body. He was subject to uncontrolled trances unproductive of any vision. This was because at such times his spirit would withdraw, thus permitting a dark one to enter its seat. He would fall down upon the ground, and the demon's spume would issue from his mouth. Therefore, at such times he had to be kept from the eyes of the people, lest they were seized with the fear of demons devastating the land and sapping its fertility. Yet not everything could be kept hidden from the people, for Pharaoh lived as the fish within the garden pool. Therefore the people learned of his grievous wickedness and turned from him. Nevertheless, it was not as bad as the marketplace chatter stated. This Pharaoh had many powerful opponents in high places. The tales are much exaggerated. Some, not knowing the inside of the pot, declared him to be the very light of goodness. Perhaps the truth is that in him good and evil swung out to the extremes of the balances. Yet weighed one against the other, evil bore down no more in him than in the case of those much less evil in the scales and much less good to counterbalance it. The son of Nabahatan, one conceived in wickedness, was slain in battle. Therefore, the younger son, one also born of the union of evil, became king in Egypt in his day. While yet young, he became a follower of the new rites of mystery, which his father had set up in imitation of the mysteries of the hidden God. These new rites were themselves hidden within a new form of worship set up by Nabahatan. Of themselves, these were not things of wickedness, but they inclined too far forwards ritual, which was futile, and ceremonial, that was purposeless. Though the new mysteries served to spiritualize and could awaken the spirit, they went just so far and could go no further. They led to a dead end. They went as far as the grim threshold, but could not lead beyond it. As far as the faithful were concerned, the setting up of a new form of worship made little difference to their position in the land, but they did attempt to draw the young prince wholly within their fold. Because of his manner of life, the king, his father, was precluded from this. I will go back to when the father of Nabahatan, a man of great valor, much beloved by the people, became feeble through a wound that troubled him in his old age. It was then that his queen, the noble Tawi, priestess of the faithful, urged him to send for the young prince Nabahatan, though he was not then so called, to become his staff and take up some of the burden. In this manner, it was hoped to secure the throne of Egypt once more for the one of the faithful, an end towards which the faithful had long labored. Undoubtedly, the enlightened ones and the chosen ones from among the faithful played some part in the introduction of the new form of worship, but unfortunately they were not equal to the opportunities of the times. This is an instance when too much concern with spirituality, too little interest and involvement in mortal affairs can prove a fatal handicap. The lesson to be learned from all this, the whole purpose of its telling, is that at all times a good balance must be maintained between spirituality and earthly existence. However great the spiritual goal ahead, nevertheless at present our feet are firmly bound to earth. Whatever the eyes behold, it must not blind men to the pitfalls before their feet. To say, as many have, and the new form of worship clashed with the old established worship of Ammon, is true in part only. The hopes of the faithful were nurtured in both, and could have been a reconciling force, weak in power and numbers though it might have been. Superficially, and among the masses of lesser priests and followers in the two beliefs, there was antagonism and strife. While the flame of Aten waned, the sun of the new form of worship rose, but it was the popularity of Queen Tawi among the people, her wisdom and insight, that enabled the young prince to maintain his place at the king's right hand and share the royal symbols despite hostility by the priests of Ammon. Had he dutifully followed the path of the true way, all would have been well. Perhaps, and this seems more likely, he did not quite understand it. Probably his intentions were good, but good intent is not sufficient. Good intent is nullified by lack of wisdom and knowledge and confounded unless supported by example and deeds. It is not sufficient for a man to proclaim a way of life for others unless he lives according to its principles himself. Too often have men tried to direct others along a path they are reluctant to tread themselves. This is not the least of hypocrisies. When his father died, the young king Nabahatan ruled in equality with his mother. They shared the royal seat and symbols, but he acted in a manner unbefitting a son. He inclined away from the high-born ladies of royal blood. His interests were not those of Pharaoh, and this caused the hearts of those who oppressed him to rise in hope. It also isolated him from the faithful, who would have been his most ardent supporters, though their loyalty remained with the queen. When their Pharaoh showed no inclination to marry, and strange rumors were heard about him in the streets and marketplaces, the people became disturbed and uneasy. Also, the highborn ones about him, the court officials, the princes and governors of the land, were perturbed at his interest in the mistress of songstresses at the temple of Ammon in Victory. The faithful were perturbed also, for within this temple was one of their secret shrines. This could have been the turning point for the faithful in Egypt had the king been other than he was, for there were several princesses of the royal blood numbered among them. As it was, the faithful were antagonized. The new form of worship introduced by this pharaoh was simple enough. Outwardly, it had all the symbols and ceremonial beloved by the people, with sufficient substance in it to attract the spiritually inclined. It could have formed a fitting gateway to the path of the true way, another light guiding men along the road to the embarkation port for truth. Behind the symbols and ceremonial, the pharaoh worshipped the spirit behind the sun, the spirit of light and life as a direct, fully conscious member outflowing from the great God behind all. The king, however, being cut off in the midst of his instruction, perceived the road but dimly. There is little doubt of his genuine desire to bring the true light to the people, but he was not wise enough to know, firstly, that one who brings light must be one in whom light burns brightly, and secondly, that the multitude cannot be exposed to its unveiled brightness with impunity. The king, severed from his weaknesses, could have been a truly great ruler, a steady light before the eyes of men, the guide to a new age for the people of the land. But he was one who cast heavily on both arms of the balances. Nebahanan knew enough of the secret mysteries to realize that he would need a new place of worship, uncontaminated by previous concentration of the twin powers. If he were to succeed in opening even the first door, Therefore, he moved his court to a new city, within which was a temple outwardly dedicated to the new light, which he enshrined for the place of flame. It was a sanctum for those whom he called the awakers of the spirit to light. From this we get the expression light within, the light behind the light, used even to this day. The priests of Ammon were impoverished to pay for the new city. Hang on one second. Where was I? City. The king had a son by the lady of songstresses, one destined for greatness, though his greatness was not perceived by the eyes of men. When later this son was exiled to wander in strange places, his mother cast herself into the arms of Sebek. But this is something the telling of which has no place here. However, with the removal of the king's household to the new city, its power was diminished. The people under the two crowns became divided against themselves. The rulers became unsettled in their posts, and there were revolts in the colonies towards the east. It was a time of unease because of the dispersion of the power. Now also, because of the most grievous wickedness of the Pharaoh, all the protecting divinity of his blood, which, though diminished by the generations of willfulness, yet remained potent, was dissipated. Thus all the land suffered and was restless. Then it was that some of the faithful from the city of the old royal residence, not from the new one as told, contacted the eyes and the ears of the king, so that the Pharaoh was counseled to take himself a wife. In this manner alone could the clamor of the people be stilled and their hearts put at ease. It It was then that the high priest at the Temple of the Visible Light, by a cunning move, brought the young princess called Nefer in our tongue before Pharaoh. She was a temple maiden, daughter of a king, and once devoted to the great god in silence. Pharaoh took her to wife, but he showed her little affection, though she was not unbeautiful, even with a beauty not of this land. Nevertheless, in the eyes of the people, the marriage appeared successful enough, though perhaps the outward display of affection was overdone. Still, the queen, being more frail than Egyptian women, could bear only daughters. There is another reason for this, but it cannot be gone into here with propriety. It is something between women. Things were not as they appeared, and Nefer despised the king in her heart for his secret wickedness. I have mentioned the surviving son of the king, one born under the darkest cloud, the secret of whose illumined birth had been unrevealed, though it was known to a few. Some of these were antagonistic to the new form of worship proclaimed by the king, and they used this knowledge to their own advantage. I have also mentioned another son, one born to the lady of songstresses, and he was bound to a different destiny altogether. The son born to Pharaoh by the lady of songstresses was also born to high estate through her. I will not record his name, lest even now it be used with evil intent, for it is a name of power. I will not disclose his titles, but call him just what he was, the master. When the master was born, Pharaoh was quite indifferent towards him, though through the nature of his blood he was not unexposed to danger. The account of how the child was stolen from the temple garden by the priests of Ammon, how it was rescued by a Syrian in the services of Nefer, disguised as a woman vendor of spices, and Celtis, a captain of craft, is known and need not be retold. However, though it is true that the child was carried away by a vessel, he was not taken to the lands of the Henbu. He was not brought up in the household of the captain of craft. The child was left at the temple of another in splendor, Anthor in splendor, where sweet waters kissed the bitter, and brought back to the city of the horizon at dawning. Later, both child and mother were taken into the royal household, for the two women had long been friends, even before Nefer became queen. Yet Pharaoh knew not that the man-child within the household of Nefer was his, for the tale had been put about that the son of the lady of songstresses was dead. Thus, even in the shadow of the royal household, the master grew up to walk in the path of truth. As the years went down into dust, the land of Egypt crumbled and began to fall apart. Nefer, because she followed the pure light, could not dwell with Pharaoh, while the life he led was an abomination against purity. She was an ever faithful one, though in her disgust she must have been tempted to be otherwise. The queen removed herself and her household in the 15th year of the reign of Nabahatan. It was then put about by those who licked the feet of Pharaoh that she was a fickle woman of wanton ways. They said she was an adulteress and called upon her beauty to bear witness against her. What they said was false. It is equally false that all beautiful women are fickle and wanton. True, such women may be subjected to greater temptations, but if they resist these, are they not so much the greater? Are they not so much more what a beautiful woman should be, the true inspiration of men? Surely there can be no doubt that the Pharaoh was abominable, for how could any but an abnormal one treat such a woman thus? Nefer sought refuge in Labados, where there was a secret shrine to the great god, and resigned herself to a life of great virtue. With her went the master, then on the threshold of manhood, but his true mother did not go with them. Without the temple gates at Labados, beneath a sycamore tree, dwelt a three-eyed man, Happoa, one who could foreknow the future, who had the gift of far-seeing, but he was aged and infirm. One day the master chanced to pass that way, and he came upon Hippoa as some youths mocked him and cast sand upon his head. Then the heart of the master was filled with wrath, and taking up the staff of Hippoa, which lay upon the ground, he laid it on the backs of the youths, and they were discomfited. When they had fled, he secured the old man, and, returning into the city, brought forth food, so that Hippoa ate and was made content. Then the master sat at the feet of Hippoa and heard his words, for they were words of wisdom and truth. Hippoa was one who knew the mystery of the great God and the secrets of the hidden places, for he was one of the twice born. Thus the master became the old man's staff. Eventually the day came when the two journeyed to a secret place within the wilderness, so that the master might approach the threshold. When Nafar left, wickedness consumed good in Nabahatan, and the chambers of his heart lay open and unprotected. Then a dark one entered into him and drove him out into the barren places of the wilderness. It is said that Pharaoh fled through the wilderness, uttering horrible cries and howling as dogs howl, so that all men departed from him in fear. Thus it came about that Nabahatan came upon Hippoa and the master as they sat beneath the shade of a rock in the heat of the day, and the tongue of the king was blackened with the fire of the dark one that held him. Hippoa cooled the fire within the king and expelled the dark one, so that the king was made whole again. Then they went, the three of them, to the place where the fighting men of the Pharaoh were encamped, the king riding upon an ass. When the king was again beckoned in his royal garments and girded with the symbols of power, he gave Hippoa a place of honor, and the master dwelt at the gate of Pharaoh. Within the city of the horizon at dawning was the temple of the sun's dawning, at which Nabahatan officiated as high priest. But after his return with Hippoa, he built a residential temple up riverwards called the Sun's Blessing. Some men have called it the Temple of Blessing of Light, the Temple of the Blessing of Light. This was erected in 3 courts, one of which was called Nafar's Memory, a place dedicated to womanly virtues. There, when she came of age, his daughter by Nafar, a maiden called Meritin, was consecrated in service. There is a description of this maiden in a scroll kept at the shrine dedicated to the martyred maidens of chastity at Nomen, the city of forgotten wickednesses. Says, as I stood before the gate called Treasure of Life, on one pillar of which was engraved the words, when the eyes see, the ears hear, and the nose smells, they transmit to the spirit that it understands. I saw the young daughter of the king. She was not tall or fat, and her feet were delicately formed. Her curls were long, but tied back from her face and anointed with sweetly fragrant oils. She passed close by, and I noticed her garments gave out a delicate perfume. Her eyes were large and unusually long-lashed. Her glance was soft and restrained, her whole bearing modest. Her skin was lighter than the pale copper of an askant, like the cherished ostrich egg, soft as the finest oil. Her nose perhaps slightly larger than usual, but fine and delicately formed. Her mouth was small, though her lips were full, and even then tantalizing with secret promise. About her head was a circlet of gold, and she wore a necklace of gold and blue stones. She was clad in the pure garment of fine linen, fringed above and below with blue and red. Upon it were workings of gold ornamentation. Her arms were bracelets of burnished copper interwoven with gold and silver. She had just come from the sacred grove, and the glistening dew of morning still dampened the lower fringe of her robe. In one hand she carried 2 small bells of copper, and in the other a small hammer of gold. Hold on. I'm going to move this. I don't know if I can. Give me a second. See what that does. That'll work. Such was the daughter of the king, yet among all the high-born ones throughout the long length of the fertile lands threaded like a necklace upon the Nile, there was no man to truly love her. Certainly many desired her, but who among them could say it was for herself alone, desirable as she was in the eyes of any man? No, she would have gone to her marriage bed unloved as a woman should be loved, a pawn in the game of power, a sacrifice at the altar of ambition, a chattel bought as a means of winning favor in the eyes of the ruler. Would not her fate have been better had she been born to a herdsman, or were she the daughter of a craftsman? Then she could have delighted in the kiss of the hot sun and the caress of a cool breeze. She could have been loved and wanted for herself alone. Such, however, was not her fate. All things she could have but this. It was after the consecration of Meriton that her eyes of Nabahatan wandered towards her lustfully, but perhaps to do him justice, he should not be judged by the same standards as other men. He was the Pharaoh of Egypt, who, according to ageless tradition, was above wrongdoing. There is not much doubt but that, at this time, he was under the control of either a demon or a dark one, which had taken possession of his heart. Also, he had been brought up to a code where interfamily love and marriage were accepted as the rule, where the sanctity of the royal blood and the need for its conservation and purity was believed in as the law. Then, too, despite his unnatural longings, which he lacked the strength to control and subdue, there is no doubt that he could and did experience extremely deep feelings of affection. He also had an unusually strong, perhaps overwhelming appreciation of beauty, as can be seen by any of his writings still in existence. Though few remain of the great many there once were, and these were in these ever in danger. Anyway, he did take his daughter in awful wickedness, his evil thoughts displaying themselves uncontrollably. Now he took no care to hide them. Throughout the new city he caused the name of Nefar to be struck out, and the name of Meriton was put in its place. Perhaps the best indication of his state of mind is shown in the prayer he composed for the offering ceremony at the festival of the interning year. With this sacred outpouring we sanctify you, great God of golden goodness. Upon your altar we offer pure butter, cakes of broken barley, fresh meat of clean beasts, dark bread and honey in 3 shades, 2 kinds of beer and dark wine poured out before you. Now we open our mouths in praise, Eternal One overlooking heaven and earth. This we do, not for ourselves alone, but also for the sanctified dead. Humbly we come before you, humbly we offer our meager sacrifice, and humbly we receive the gracious gifts, which grant us our sustenance from day to day, and even greater gifts beyond our understanding. We thank you for the peace filling the land with contentment. Teach us the meaning of your laws, which we cannot understand. Look down upon us with benevolent kindness when we err. Permit us to assist in accomplishing your will, O Lady of Loveliness, coming forth from your place of vigil, O Lady of Protection, coming forth with your maiden attendants. Speak for me with the tongue of simplicity and the heart of purity. O dedicated maiden, be my mouthpiece in the inner shrine. O sanctified one, be the listening ear before my people. Let your goodness shine upon us as the glory above shines upon earth. O pacify any wrath that rises in the glorious heart of heat. I know not all the weaknesses and wickednesses of my heart, I who am mortally blind and mortally frail. I know not all the impure longings that possess me, I who am mortally blind and mortally frail. I sought for help, but it came not. I wept, but there was none to comfort me. In the night I cried for succor, but none answered. I who am great have less than the least. O Lady of Loveliness, intercede for me in purity and devotion. Never before had such a prayer been offered in the sight of people by a pharaoh, and the people murmured that divinity had departed from the king. Nabahaton, Pharaoh of Egypt, was a strange mixture of goodness and wickedness, both carried to their extreme. I know not what his form will be in the place where the Spirit stands forth in its true aspect. Certainly, we are taught that goodness cannot entirely obliterate the evil effects of wickedness. Yet how much was the king really to blame? How much can be laid at the door of his affliction? How much apportioned to the demons in his limbs? How much to the dark ones that possessed him? These things are beyond judgment by mere mortal men. They can be properly dealt with only by a higher judge, an infallible reader of hearts. Although it had been accepted that the kindred of the Pharaoh could intermarry, and a union between parent and child was absolutely forbidden. This law from days long past was still binding, though the law which decreed that any one of royal blood suffering a demon-induced deformity or becoming possessed by a dark one should be given the draught of death was no longer enforced. This proves how evil ensues when old and trusted laws established by the wise ones of old are cast aside. It is folly to thoughtlessly discard that which has ever served well. Now when Pharaoh took Meriton in grievous wickedness, the people murmured, but none arose among them to do more. For such as not who had lapsed into but one form of wickedness was no longer there to restrain him. Nor in all probability could she have done anything, for he was Pharaoh. But when it came to the ears of Heppoah, he took himself into the wilderness and fasted there for 7 days. He then returned and gained audience with Nabahaton. Heppoah went before Pharaoh, and there, in the midst of his court, he denounced him. These were the words issuing from the mouth of Heppoah, as set down by the attending scribe. O great and mighty Pharaoh, where once the storm wind raged, there is now a gentle breeze. Where once the diligent shepherd stood, now a musician sits and idly plays. The land is no more as it was, and no man remains content within its dwelling. His dwelling. The north wind has ceased to enter the land, and the south wind eats it up. A heavy hand lies on the hearts of men, and their limbs are sluggish. They are languid and move no longer as once they did. Wherefore has all this come about, the people ask, and I answer them truly, it is because the protective power has departed from the blood of the Pharaoh. It is because of the iniquity in the palace. This is a time of woe. These things I have spoken before the eyes and ears of Pharaoh beyond the palace gates. Yet it is not in me to leave them unsaid before the face of the king himself. Where is the great one who sets goodness in the place of wickedness? Where is he who replaces injustice with justice, who hears the cry of the lowly, who causes right to prevail in the land? Where is he? I look, and I look in vain. I see only one who has defiled the protective treasures, the glory of Egypt, with iniquity. I see only one who has polluted the pure stream with the sewage of evil, who has succumbed to the ultimate in wickedness. This I see as all men see it, but I am one who sees more. I see an Egypt gone down into dust. I see plague and death stalking the streets. I see the fertile black waters turned back on themselves. I see the black land buried beneath the sand. I see grim-faced men coming from out of the east to stamp the land flat in blood. I see the dread things of the past reoccurring. I see desolation spread out on every side. Woe to you, great Pharaoh, woe to the land of Egypt. Goodness lies dying beneath the triumphant foot of evil. Virtue is betrayed into the foul hands of lonesome lust, her despairing cry unanswered by any coming to her aid. Wickedness walks unhampered through the cities, and wrongdoing is seen on every side. Woeful are these days, and doomed are those who endure them. What does the great light shining forth from this palace conceal? Sacred mysteries or secret sins? Then the arm of Pharaoh stretched forth to stop the mouth of Heppoah, and it was stopped. He was led forth, and whips were laid on his back, and he was placed within a dungeon. The events that followed remained within a shadow, and none knows the truth, for it was a time of confusion. Meriton probably died of poison administered by her own hand, as was befitting. Her tomb is known, for she was not unhonored. Some say the same potion slew the king, but others that he died of a dark demon within the heart. It seems that the potion was not a quick one, and while Meriton died in her chamber after pledging of the king was made, he fell forward with an issue of blood from his mouth. His spirit was heard in his throat. Thus it does not appear that they were slain with the one cup. It is unlikely that Meriton died by any hand other than her own, though this is said. Some say the king died after being carried to his chamber, others that he recovered, but the truth is unknown, for at this time the signal was given, and the people arose in the streets. The new worship, which nevertheless was an outgrowth from the bulb of truth, died away as the growth dies back on an onion. But like an onion, the bulb remained. The new worship was not unwelcomed in the land of Egypt, and would have survived had not its founder led an impure life. The hostility by priests of the other forms of worship would not alone have sufficed to extinguish its light. It was the maggot in the heart of the flower he raised that caused it to fall apart. To establish a pure form of worship and beliefs, its founder must also be pure of hands and heart. Whatever happened, Nebahaton was never placed within the tomb he had prepared for himself. Some say because Hippoa cursed it, but this I doubt. I know of such a curse, but I do not suppose Hippoa would have used it. Some say Pharaoh was buried with his wife, but who knows the name of the woman in whose tomb he is said to lay? I think, however, it is more likely that he is a tombless wanderer, which is not so strange when the record is considered fully. As told, it is not beyond belief that such a fate could befall even a pharaoh, and does accord with the laws of olden days. The next pharaoh married his sister, conceived in wickedness, and therefore died while yet young. The predictions of Hippoa were averted by the happenings in the land, happenings that purified it during the days of Pharaoh's short-lived successor, and came a great one to rule the land, and peace and prosperity returned. Of his times this is written, Be joyful, O people, for a time of gladness has descended upon the whole land. A righteous and royal king has been set over us, one truly favored in the eyes of the great ones. The waters rise and fall in moderation, the days are long and productive. The hours of night are measured and restful, the moon maintains her appointed seasons, and the sunship steers a straight course. The bright torch of heaven burns steadily, and the stars retain their stations. Once more, men must qualify by goodness for the right to govern and to hold official positions. All is well with the land, if this could be but written of these days. Of Nemertine, wife of Cupola, men say she established the sisterhood of sin, but this is untrue, for they misunderstand the writings. The written things are misread. The writings of men are as plows which cannot follow a straight furrow. Everyone at birth is a twin and has a spirit twin. Nemertian was, of all women, the most virtuous, yet surely no woman ever evoked such malice in the hearts of her sisters. Once men said that the king was the shepherd of every man, and that wickedness was not in him, that however lowly the man in distress, he would devote hours of his time to bring him justice. If our fathers had but known the nature of the men who would follow as kings, or had the king of olden days foreseen what was to come, the sons of the kings would have been destroyed, even though they were the seeds of divinity. Perhaps we do injustice to our rulers, for when the governors are bad, maybe they are no worse than a corrupt, degenerate, and indifferent generation deserves. When you decry your rulers, read the hearts of your people. The good ruler should not speak falsehood. He should be as great as his responsibilities. Each word should be weighed before spoken, for it is accepted as gold and not as thistledown. He should take heed of his own judgments, for the judgments of eternity draw near. He should be, above all, an example to all men. The gardener of wickedness waters his land with deceit, and it brings forth falsehood. The good ruler should be above every deed of meanness. He should be the father of the orphan and the husband of the widow. A true leader of the people should be free from every kind of avarice, a man above every kind of pettiness. He should be a man of wide vision. He should be like the rising waters that feed the fertile fields. He should be swift and sure to execute judgment on him to whom punishment is due. Oh, where does he sleep today? In what generation will he come forth? The end of this scroll is unknown. This was not one in the great chest. It is one added in the days of preservation.